Our speaker graduated from the University of Minnesota Duluth. He was an ROTC, then went in the Air Force, become a KC 135 driver. He was in Strategic Air Command, and he got out after 7 years, came home, went to join the reserves, flying the C-130s. At the same time, he got a job at the Metropolitan Airport. And he's worked his way up as our fearless leader of the airport. In addition to all that work he's doing, the 2 jobs, etc., he's got a son that's a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. He's got a daughter who's a major in the 934. Jeff was inducted into the Prestige Minnesota Aviation Hall of Fame in 2003. So it's my privilege to present our speaker, Jeff Hamiel. Let's give him a big hand.
Got it. Glenn, thanks very much. You can all hear me, I'm assuming. I'm losing my voice. I don't know why. I lose it about 3 or 4 days a week. I get hoarse, so just I'm going to wear the microphone. Let me start by telling you, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. This is really an unusual audience for me to speak to for 2 reasons. One, I don't think I've been in a room where I've spoken to an audience with the kind of history that sits in this room right now. And it's just very interesting and very enjoyable to listen to all of you guys talk about what you did and where you did it. It brings back memories of my own dad, who in fact was a United States Marine, fought in the South Pacific, was part of the whole Pacific campaign, was wounded severely in Guam, survived. That was the end of the war for him. And then spent the rest of his life dealing with the aftermath of wounds he received during the war. And when I was a kid, I grew up watching my dad kind of go through all this and thought, yeah, the military, I'm not so sure. Because I was pretty miserable for a lot of years. But at the end of the day, I was very proud of what he did. And when I got to college, I knew I wanted to fly airplanes. I have a cousin who went to the Naval Academy, and he took me for a plane ride in Sheldon, Iowa when I was about 10 or 12 years old. It was about that time I decided that airplanes were pretty darn cool things. And so my dad, my cousin, I went into the Air Force, went during ROTC, as Glenn just said. Probably the biggest surprise I've had is that 2 of my 3 kids who never expressed a minute's interest in the military, all the years that I was flying with these 4 guys over here, they both ended up, my son Dave went to the Air Force Academy, graduated in 1995 from the Academy, and is now Lieutenant Colonel Reservist out of Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii. My daughter Julie was a former exec officer of the wing commander of the 934th, active duty for about 6.5 years. So the family's a lot more military engaged than I ever thought it would be. And everyone's pretty proud of the fact that they're contributing. And I'm proud of my kids. I also have to say, it's a pleasure to be here and talk with all of you. It's also fun to be here because I flew with those 4 guys for years and years and years. I was in the reserve for 21 years, retired as a squadron commander in 1998. But these are four great guys. And we've been, I think, just about everybody can imagine together. Great experience. My own experience in the military, Glenn wanted me to talk a little about some of that experience. I'm not going to do a great deal because I've got stories that don't even come close to what you guys experienced, I got to tell you. But in fact, after pilot training, went to Mayes Air Force Base in Sacramento, California, ended up flying the T-29. Anybody know what that is? Okay. No, not the Sable, that's a 39. T-29 is a twin-engine prop Metroliner that navigator students flew in. There were 17 navigators stationed in that airplane. Dave, I think, Rich, you guys both in that airplane. I gotta tell you, I got on the T-38 and I was supposed to get an instructor pilot's job, and they started closing down the schools and said you had an alternative. Wait 6 months and don't fly or longer, or go into the training command of Mather. So I went to Mather. I reported from duty, and I thought I had gone from about 1970 up to about 1945, because the ramp was full of these old twin-engine prop airliners that had been converted into navigator training platforms. And I thought, what did I just do? But I flew in California for about 4 years, and actually thoroughly enjoyed it. Flew, quite frankly, all over the country and all over the Caribbean and Canada and Alaska with this old beat-up airplane flying navigators around. It was a good job. And then from there I left, went to KC-135s, and so KC-135s for about 3.5 years on KI Sawyer Air Force Base in Marquette, Michigan. And we were pretty much all over the world. We were in Europe, in the Pacific, all over North and North, for the most part. And it was just an enjoyable airplane to fly, except I couldn't stand alert. We were on alert for like anywhere from 2 weeks, well, you know. By the way, we were both in the 46th Air Refueling Squadron, not at the same time, but he knows what I'm talking about. In any event, I just hated alerts. So I got a master's degree. And I thought, when I get this master's degree, I'm going to go up and talk to the wing commander, which was a bad decision, by the way. Judson Ruth, Colonel Judson Ruth. I went in his office, and I was on alert that day and saluted. And he said, "What can I do for you, Captain?" And I said, "No, Colonel, I'd love to talk to you about maybe getting out of Strategic Air Command. You can get the attack or MAC." His head just turned redder than a ball, okay? I said, "Son," excuse the language, "you turn your ass around and get the hell out of here and get back in the alert position. I'd let me ever see you again." And he said, "You'll never get out of SAC because you only want to get out to go fly for the Air Force," which was not the truth, but he thought that's the case. And he said, "Besides, you have the guts to get out of the Air Force because there are no jobs out there for you." That was the day I decided to get out of the Air Force. So when I got off alert the next day, I went to personnel office, put my DOS and gave a separation request. And it took one day when I got a call from the wing commander's office. He said, "Get your ass in here." And he said, "Got news for you. You're grounded permanently. You're never going to fly an airplane again. And I'm not going to sign the papers to let you get out early either." And I said, "Yes, sir." That was a big mistake. Anyway, that's just, that was active duty experience. I actually did get out of the Air Force, went to work for the Metropolitan Airports Commission, and just but it's a matter of a few moments as to what I was thinking. When I left the squadron, because I'd been grounded, I was the tanker operations and emergency when I left the Air Force, I came to the Airports Commission. And this thing's kind of in and out, isn't it? And I met Claude Schmidt. I don't know if you guys know that name or not. But Claude's a kind of a quiet, low-key kind of a guy who was a retired naval commander, flew fighters during the war. And he was my boss, and he said, "Well, come on in the morning, we'll talk about what's going on." So we compared the Navy and the Air Force, and I would tell him how much better the Air Force was than the Navy was, and we go back and forth. And he was retired, and what he did was, after he retired, he went to the FAA for about 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, retired from the FAA as a check airman at 747s, and joined the Airports Commission for 10 more years. His boss was Ray Glumac Drive, and they were coming to the airport. Ray was a retired naval captain. So I entered this organization where we had military guys from World War II in Korea with distinguished careers. It was 8 years before I found out that Claude Schmidt was a World War II fighter ace in the Pacific. Because he was a very, very humble guy who would just talk about stories and history. And the reason I never went back to fly for the airlines but stayed with the Airports Commission, because when I got that job, I was the manager of noise abatement and environmental affairs. The guys in the squadron, the tanker squadron, said, "You gotta be nuts to go leave flying KC-135s and become a guy answering noise complaint calls." But the idea was to go to the airlines. But once I got a job at the Airports Commission, I respected these two guys so much. Another guy named Scott Matheson was a World War II Air Force pilot, Army Air Corps. The relationship was just really solid. It was great. I had great support. So I was a young guy. I was 30 years old. These guys were in their mid-50s, and quite early 50s. Not that they were really old guys. But the respect that I had, the job that I had, the opportunity they provided me as a young person was remarkable. And the reason why I stayed is because I love the environment, love the airport. I want to stay involved with aviation, so I joined the Air Force Reserve. I met these 4 guys and about 50 more guys like them. And I have to tell you, for every year in the Air Force, except for alert on active duty, I loved it. And what I liked even more was every day I spent in the Air Force Reserve. What's interesting is I flew more hours in the reserve every single year than I ever did on active duty. And we went more places and did more things. I think doing good things. I think we did a lot of good things in those days. Humanitarian kind of stuff, a lot of drug kind of traffic tracking kind of stuff in Central and South America. But a lot of people being transported for medical services, taken from disaster zones and areas and transported to the U.S. or someplace for medical support. It was a very rewarding career, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And the most important part of the reserve for me were the people that I flew with. Just like these 4 guys over here. They get to be kind of your brothers and sisters, and you see them all the time, you fly with them, and most of you know what that's all about. That's something that I think is missing in most of our culture today, and that is young people today don't understand what it is to give your time and get to know people and depend on them and work and do something good together. But that's what the military is in my mind. We do a lot of nasty things because we have to, because of the circumstances. We do a lot of good things because good things need to be done as well. So I'll stop talking about the military, but I will tell you that my 29 years in the Air Force, active duty and reserve, was a thoroughly enjoyable time of my life, and I think about it fondly all the time, just as you guys do, and I'm sure these 4 guys think the same way. So with that, I'll stop talking about that and talk a little bit about what might be interesting today for you, and that is the Air Force job led me into the Airports Commission job. I became executive to the Commission, CEO in 1985. I'm retiring on May 16th, 39 years at the Airport Authority. Another great job. I've been an extremely fortunate person, and I've been able to fly airplanes my entire adult life, still do with the Commission, and be in the military, and be as part of the Airport Authority working with the airlines. A fascinating, fascinating job. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Airports Commission, but I'm not going to belabor it because I'd like to have some time for Q&A and talk a little bit about things that might be on your mind. But let me just share some with you about the Metropolitan Airports Commission. Let's get the right one here. There we go. The MAC is a public corporation created by the legislature back in 1943, basically to operate airports in the 7-county metropolitan area of the Twin Cities. We own and operate 7 airports in the area, and I'll show you in a few moments. We basically own and have the ability to own and operate airports within the 35-mile radius of Minneapolis and St. Paul City Hall, so you got these overlapping circles. Bottom line is that we choose not to do that. We own and operate 7 airports. All the others are kind of on their own. I work for a board of directors. There are 15 members on the board. Chairman is appointed by the governor along with 11 other commissioners. And the mayor of Minneapolis, the mayor of St. Paul serve on our board as well. They all serve for 4-year, the appointed people serve for 4-year terms, which means that every year we lose 2 or 3 or 4 commissioners and get new appointments. That's important because the airport's controversial from the standpoint of noise, safety, and community concerns about safety. We can't have someone who's extremely excited about environmental control take over the airport authority and decide to shut down, try to restrict the hours, try to close down the airport operation or move it. That just can't happen. It's too large of an enterprise, too integral to the economic vitality of our community. As a result, with staggered terms of 4 years, you got commissioners coming and going all the time, which means that no single governor can put all 12 people in and change the direction of the organization. So the MAC has got a great reputation, continuous improvement over time, and continuously growing. Reliever airports, these are the airports that you see on the chart. It's probably tough to see. Just type Minneapolis, St. Paul International in the middle. We don't operate the St. Paul Downtown Airport, Holman Field. We own the Lake Hamiel Airport, the East Metro. On the Crystal Airport up in the northwest corner, the Anoka County Airport, due north of the Twin Cities, Flying Cloud Airport, Eden Prairie, and the Air Lake Airport in Lakeville. Those 7 airports are the largest system of airports in the United States as far as numbers of airports, not the busiest as far as operations. We call the outlying airports reliever airports because what they do is provide a choice for private aircraft and corporate aircraft to use airports other than MSP. We're trying to preserve the capacity of MSP for airplanes that need 10,000-foot runways. If you don't need 10,000 feet, then use one of the other smaller airports and hopefully land closer to your ultimate destination. Give you some numbers, 360 to 370,000 takeoffs and landings a year in the reliever airport system, about 410,000 operations in MSP. I'm going to skip this slide so to tell you that we have partnerships. We're a public agency. We are the government. There's no doubt about it. We work closely, however, with federal regulatory agencies, the TSA, the FAA, Customs and Border Protection. They're big partners of ours with a large presence in Minnesota. But more importantly, our biggest customers are the private sector. The airline companies, all the consultants that support the airline companies, all the businesses in the terminal building, for example, the food and beverage, retail sales, all those operations, those venues, commercial operations in the terminal buildings of both T1 and T2, they're our private partners. About 85% of all my work is done on the private sector side, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. The airport model, I'm going to skip this because you don't care about this, quite frankly, it's a little bit boring. Let me jump ahead though to a couple of things you need to know. While we are a government agency, the taxpayers do not directly support our operation. We are a completely self-supporting government enterprise. And what we do is charge people who use our facility money to have access to the airport. So if you're an airline company, we'll charge you $2.43 per 1,000 pounds of landed weight to land on our runways. Typical commercial airline is about 150, 175,000 pounds. So every time one of those things land, we average about 200, 250, 300 bucks a landing. We charge airline companies to taxi on our taxiways and park it on the ramp at the gate. We charge them for the use of the gate. We charge them a use fee to use the concourses to get to the terminal facility. We charge them for their ticket counters, baggage carousels. We own all the hangars on the airport, so the airlines lease hangars from us. Basically, they pay fees for everything that they use. And that's a substantial amount of money. I don't have my glasses on, and you can't see it here, but I'll put them on. I don't know if I can get it. Sort of wondering. Looking at the numbers, airline rates and charges about 34% of our total revenue. Concessions revenue, that is a percentage of the gross sales of the stores and businesses in the terminal building, about 7% of our revenue, of which $78 million of that is parking ramp revenue alone. So if you do come to the airport, park your car, we start taking money out of your pocket. But if you never come to the airport, never buy an airline ticket, never pick up or drop off somebody and park your car, not a penny of your tax dollar comes to my public agency. We charge rents and fees about 14% of our total income, utilities 5%. Bottom line is that we raise about $330 million a year to run the Minneapolis-St. Paul Metropolitan Airport system of airports. All of those dollars come to us in the form of user fees. If you use our airport, we charge you to park your car. We get a little bit of your ticket tax. There's a thing called a passenger facility charge. Every departing passenger gives us $4.50 as buried in your ticket. That stays here locally. About 10% of your ticket is in taxes to the federal government. That money goes to the Aviation Trust Fund, and then we fight to get those dollars back in the Twin Cities. MSP contributes about $40 million a year to the Aviation Trust Fund. We get back on average about $15 or $18 million a year. Although that does change in the next couple of years with large construction programs. We'll get back more than the $40 million we put in. You can't see this behind me because the slide is too small. This is a list of what it costs to operate through the nation's airports. It costs an airline company to move a passenger through the airport. The most expensive airport in the United States today is Newark. For every passenger that an airline passes through that airport making connections arriving or departing, it's $30.14 per person. The average of the larger airports in the country, there are 29 larger airports in the United States. The average for those is about $12.58 average cost. In Minneapolis-St. Paul, the secret to our success in part is that we're in the bottom third at $6.50 per passenger. Delta Airlines' Richard Anderson has said Minneapolis-St. Paul is the most efficiently run airport in North America and the most cost-effective one in the Delta Airlines system worldwide. And the reason why is we have a small staff. We do things as smart as we possibly can, and I got that small staff already consultants who we hire when we need them, and when we're done with their work, we send them away. As opposed to having a very large staff with 5 architects and 10 engineers, I have 1 architect, 2 engineers, and basically we do all the construction by those folks being project managers, and it works very, very well. So the bottom line here is that even though we charge users a lot of fees, the fact is Minneapolis is a bargain. Airlines like coming into Twin Cities. We're able to recruit more and more competitive service over time. Air service-wise, we're the 16th busiest in the airport in the United States. 13th busiest when we talk about takeoffs and landings. I'll show you some numbers in a second on that. Since 2008, Governor Dayton, I report, by the way, to the governors and the state legislature on behalf of our board. So every year, I spend time testifying for months at the legislature. I also have a relationship with the governor on behalf of our board, as is our chairman. So I've gotten to know all the governors since the days of Rudy Perpich. By the way, I'll tell you that, with the exception of one unusual character, most every governor is pretty darn dedicated, pretty serious. If you look at the politics and so forth, I have a pretty different view of politics than most people do. I actually believe these people try to do what's the best interest of our community. And for the most part, when they've talked with me about issues related to aviation and the airport, it's been nothing but straight up business. How can we do a better job? In 2008, Governor Dayton came, about that time, he came to us and he basically said the Airports Commission does not have enough competition. We need more competitive air service to challenge Northwest Airlines. And since 2008, we've got introduced Air France, Alaska, Condor on a seasonal basis to Frankfurt, Southwest Airlines, and Spirit into our market. And that's a significant amount of growth. We have 57 new routes that have been added since 2008. We have 155 non-stop destination points out of Minneapolis-St. Paul, 126 domestic and 9 international. To put that in perspective, on a per capita basis, based on our population, the only airport that has more non-stop flights for our community other than Minneapolis-St. Paul is Denver, Colorado. We have more non-stop flights per capita than any other airport in the country, including New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Miami, you name it. You can get here non-stop to more places based on our population than you can any place else in the nation. It's remarkable. We have competitive routes, over 50 routes, so there's competition against Delta Airlines on 50 of the most popular routes. The bars are basically the passenger activity. Passengers peaked in 2005 at about 37.8 million. Then we saw the bankruptcy of Northwest Airlines and Delta in September of 2005 or 6. Started seeing declines in passengers. Then we saw the economy starting to falter in 2007, 2008, and bottomed out in 2009. Passengers dropped from almost 38 million to 32 million. Huge loss in revenue for the Airports Commission, but we were secure financially. And since 2009, we've seen now slow economic recovery, and now we're back in the area of about 35 to 36 million passengers as of 2015. We're projecting that in 2016 we'll exceed 38.5 million passengers, which is more than the peak of 2005. Now, the good news is that we got more and more airplanes, more and more people, this is passengers, not necessarily a lot more flights. Looking at the flights at MSP, our busiest flight year was back in 2004, just before this graph begins, about 535,000 takeoffs and landings. Today we're down to about 411,000 takeoffs and landings. So how can you have more passengers and fewer flights? What you've got are larger capacity airplanes. The smaller regional jets are disappearing. The smallest regional jets now operating regularly are 76 passengers, not 50. The new airplanes coming online are full mainline airplanes being purchased by the carriers. So we'll see more bigger airplanes flying out of the Twin Cities. Important numbers for you to be aware of, and now move up. There we go. Look at passenger activity over the years. In 2014, we had 35 million passengers. We peaked at 38 in 2005. We are forecasting a growth by 2035 of hitting 54 million passengers a year out of the Twin Cities. Dramatic growth. Aircraft operations-wise, 412,000, 415,000 operations today. We peaked at 540,000 back in 2004. We're anticipating growing to about 511,000 by 2035. In other words, in 2035, we will not get to the peak of 2004, 12 years ago. Why is that? More and more people are flying, but they're flying higher capacity airplanes on fewer flights. And the fewer flights are comprised of quieter, more energy, eating, more efficient airplanes. So can we transport 54 million people in 2035? You bet we can, with fewer takeoffs and lands than we had in 2005. Important from an environmental standpoint, a safety standpoint, operational standpoint. Let me take you back to this one. I'll be real quick. Between Chicago and Seattle, and as far south as St. Louis, there is no piece of real estate the size of our airport, 3,400 acres, that generates more money that goes into the local economy than the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. We pump about $10 billion a year in the local economy with jobs, visitors, investment, the whole deal. My government agency is only 600 people. So we're a small piece of that. But the bottom line is $10 billion is critical to the economic future of our community and our state. So when people talk about shutting down the airport, or restricting its operations, or moving the airport someplace else, or pushing traffic away, when you decide to stagnate the operation and growth of the airport, you're going to stagnate the economy of the metropolitan area in the state of Minnesota. So just a little number to keep in the back of your head, $10 billion is a lot of money. Some key things to keep in mind. Growth in air service demand will occur naturally. People tell me that estimating 54 million passengers by 2035 is ridiculous. You're simply padding the numbers because you want to grow and expand the airport. Well, let me tell you, the last 70 years, we've grown at about 2.25% per year. Take the current level of 35 million passengers at 2.25% per year, or over 55 million passengers. So we've got natural growth, that's what that basically says. Environmental reviews have already been conducted and done through 2020. We've got all that work done, so we can't be stuck on environmental purposes. And we've got money put in the bank to take care of our noise mitigation program through 2023. We have spent about $500 million acoustically mitigating noise in homes. And a lot of you would say, hey, they bought the house, they knew the airport was there, why are you spending $500 million of your money and public money insulating homes? The reality is it is more economical for us to use the airport at its current site, let it continue to grow with quieter airplanes in the future, and keep it moving and serving our community. The site that the Metropolitan Council chose for a new airport 10 years ago, if we went ahead and built it, was 7.5 miles southwest of Hastings, Minnesota. So if you think the drive in Denver, Colorado from downtown Brenner, Pena Boulevard to DIA at 16 miles is a long drive. Try to drive from Minneapolis, St. Paul down to Hastings, and south of Hastings 7 miles. It made no sense. Staying where we are is important for the economics of the region, for job growth and for strength of the economic outreach. And with that, I'll take any questions you might have. Sir?
A few years ago, there was a movement to close Crystal Airport.
Yeah.
Can you kind of update us on that, where that sits now? I heard we're going to lose it.
Yeah, the rumor is that we're going to close Crystal Airport. We had a chairman about 15 years ago that looked at the number of airports that we have and said, that's a small airport, it's underutilized, it's a waste of money. And so she talked to the city council and the mayor of Crystal about closing it. Didn't tell too many people about it. It was pretty upsetting for us. We have spent the last 15 years trying to tell people we're not going to close Crystal, and we're not. We are going to reconfigure it down to a 2-runway operation, one northwest, southeast, and one cross runway, because that's right-sizing the airport for our future needs. But Crystal's not going away. If you have a hangar and airplane, don't sell it cheap. It'll grow and it'll be an improved airport. Sir?
What are your thoughts on the ideas of some Republican legislators about privatizing some of the aviation agencies, such as air traffic control?
Yeah. Well, we've looked at it. I've testified in Congress on that issue. I'm one of those folks who believe that the FAA does not need to be split and privatized. And I'll tell you why. As you may know, during this last year in Congress, they looked at separating out the air traffic organization, they call it the ATO, and be a privately managed air traffic control agency where corporations and airlines would pay on a per-use basis for instrument flight rule services such as en route, high altitude en route, and shooting approaches, takeoffs and landings at airports and major hubs. The assumption there is that the FAA is inefficient and can't manage their resources well. The fact of the matter is that technology-wise, the United States is behind on improving the efficiency of our air traffic control systems. But the work that's done by the air traffic controllers is very, very professional and works extremely well. I don't want to discredit the controllers. I think that they do a good job. Some want to privatize, some not. Those who want to privatize believe they can make more money if it's run by a private enterprise. Others think that it should be a federally operated agency because it provides equal service across all borders. When I testified in Congress, I basically said that from an airport's perspective, the system works very well, provided we implement next-gen technology. We had a familiarization flight that went from K.I. Sawyer to Kinchlow Air Force Base in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and from there to Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha, Nebraska. That airplane took off 8 o'clock one night, landed in Kinchlow and Sault Ste. Marie, put on 4 flight crew members. The airplane was full of our squadron pilots and a couple of our navigators. The airplane had a catastrophic failure of the number 4 engine over Alpena, Michigan, en route to Wordsmith Air Force Base before they went on to Offutt. What happened is, because the plane was full of pilots, okay? So when the engine exploded, it literally exploded on the right side of the airplane. The aircrew immediately put the airplane into a controlled descent, which in the KC-135 is about a 250 mile an hour, knots per hour descent, autopilot. And they started working on putting the fire out and kind of shutting down the systems and declaring the emergency. The guys in the back knew what had happened, so a lot of guys from the back area came up to the front cockpit saying, "Can we help you out?" And I don't know for sure exactly what happened, but what ultimately did happen for sure is that the airplane was in a descent. Too many fingers in the pie. Someone forgot who was flying the airplane and who was trying to deal with the emergency procedure with all the help. The first thing that the crew realized was a bang on the bottom of the fuselage. The co-pilot, they think, reached forward and grabbed the yoke and pulled the yoke back, because it was on autopilot in a 1,000-foot minute rate of descent. What it did was basically fly right into the trees just outside of Alpena, Michigan, hit the ground, slid for 1.25 miles. The tail broke off and tumbled. The airplane exploded. We lost everybody on board except for the 4 guys who got in Alpena, Michigan, because they were back in the boom operator pod. They survived the crash with severe burns. None of them went back to flying. All of them were discharged with significant medical issues. That's when I got the call from, not the wing commander, but from out saying, you're back on the crew, you're flying the airplane, we're putting you back with your crew, you'll fly until you leave. The point of the story is that bad things happen. You have to be prepared for that. So I always cared and worried about it. I was on the accident investigation team for that accident as to what happened. And the night that I wasn't at home, the phone rang and the helicopter had actually landed in the parking lot of where I lived on base. Picked myself up and my neighbor and we flew out to Alpena. And when we got there, it was just fires all over the place. And we did find the guys that survived around the hull of a landing gear tire that was burning. The point is that that crash experience plus one other that was experienced in the Air Force, I've always reminded myself I'm probably the only guy on the staff of the airport that's actually been part of an accident investigation and a crash. So I've always worried about crashes.
All right.